Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful edition of Streaming with Chris Short and Andrew Sullivan. That's what we're going to call this right now. Actually, no, we are going to install some OpenShift on vSphere, and it's going to be awesome. Right, buddy?
It sure is.
Introduce yourself to the audience, please, sir.
Sure, happy to. So Andrew Sullivan, Technical Marketing Manager with the Red Hat Cloud Platforms Business Unit. So Chris and I are teammates.
Yes.
We both focus on various aspects of OpenShift and other duties as assigned, which could be just about anything that you can possibly imagine in the world of yes. So I think we scheduled this out till 3:00 Eastern, which gives me about an hour and 45 minutes.
I mean, yeah, I have a hard stop at 3, and I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, everybody that's been waiting. For whatever reason, my streaming rig decided that it was streaming just fine, and then no, it was not going to stream anymore. So it decided it needed a quick kick in the butt. So, yeah, let her rip,
angry.
buddy. It was very angry. Like Andrew could see it from like here. It was angry. Yeah, it was weird, but yeah.
All right.
Fun.
So I'll just kick it off then without further ado, and hopefully we'll get through as much as we get through, right?
Yeah. At the very least, text me when you're done.
Just set up a VPN. We'll all just remote into your house. It's fine.
That's fine.
It'll be
good.
So I put in one of the chats, I think the Twitch chat, which gets spread across everywhere. We have the option of doing either static IPs or DHCP IPs when we're doing vSphere UPI. So I think I've got things ready so that I can do either. I can't do both because I don't have enough resources for that.
Right.
So if there's a preference, anybody speak up in the next couple of minutes, because basically what I'm going to do is review as soon as I find the share screen button here.
So there's a question on Twitch. Is it UPI on 6.7 or 7.0? Oh, a sneak peek of IPI?
That is a great question. So what I'm going to show, and please keep in mind as I walk through this, if you have any preference towards DHCP or static IPs, just let me know in the chat, or let Chris and I know in the chat. And then once I'm done going through my vSphere setup, I'll either evaluate or flip a coin. So to answer that question, my particular vSphere lab is running vSphere 6.7 update 3. So if we look at our vSphere host, we can see it's 6.7. And this build is 151.60138.
So it seems at least 2 people, one of them works with us, wants static IPs.
Okay.
3 people, static IPs. So
all right.
Nary a request for DHCP. So there you go.
So what did I say? 151.60138. So we appear to be running 6.7, a couple of releases after U3.
Cool.
So, this is my lab. It's got a single host that's running, 64 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah. When you say your lab, you mean your home lab, not some lab in the cloud somewhere. Yeah,
it's literally sitting right over here.
Right. It's like my back desk kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So should be enough to deploy a pretty basic cluster, all of that other stuff. Very much in line with, if you saw my previous streams, I do have a RHEL 7 or CentOS 7, I don't remember which, helper node. So thank you to Christian. So my helper node is running DHCP, DNS, load balancer, all that other fun stuff that we'll walk through in just a few minutes. The only other thing that I think is relevant here is I am running an iSCSI storage domain here. This is so that I could very conveniently get access to the hardware acceleration. So we do have VAI as supported. So things like rapid clones and offload 0 and all that other fun stuff work as we're going through this process. So unless there has been any dissent, I think I heard static IPs.
That's what you're running with, buddy.
We'll go with that. So I am going to be that guy, and I'm going to walk through the documentation.
No, that's important, right? We're here to learn, and we learn in public sometimes.
Exactly. Like I said, I think I've staged a fair amount of this stuff, which is mostly just getting busy work out of the way, so that because I knew I had 2 hours coming into this, and watching me write bind configs, write named configs, is just not entertaining to me, and I can't imagine anybody else wanting to watch me do it in live. So we'll review
Christian
it.
Christian would want to watch you do it.
Yeah,
because he is all about DNS, but that's probably the only viewer. I mean, I love DNS. I'm very good at DNS, but I don't want to see the name configs. No, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we'll review, we'll look at it, but rather than writing it in real time, that's not fun. So pretty straightforward here. I'm going to start at the top and kind of walk through all of these different steps. So one thing to note with the static IP configuration, once you get to the point of deploying virtual machines, we switch over to using a bare metal configuration. So let's take a step back and talk about OpenShift deployment methods. So there are two that we talk about. One is IPI, which is the full stack automation. And I just looked over at the chat and saw that I never did answer the sneak peek of IPI. I am assuming I will have time. If nothing else, I will have time to kick it off and show you what IPI looks like. So that will be coming with OpenShift 4.5, or at least that's the nightly build that I'm using against my vSphere 6.7 cluster. vSphere 7 compatibility is not scheduled. It's not on the roadmap until after 4.5. So I don't know the precise release in theirs, and I don't want to guess, but it's on our public roadmap, wherever that's at. So I will be showing UPI with vSphere 6.7 update 3. I will also be showing, hopefully we have time, IPI with OpenShift 4.5 on vSphere 7, 6.7 U3. All right, back to what I was saying before. IPI, full stack automation, right? This means that the installer takes responsibility and uses the credentials, the information that you provide it, to create the infrastructure that is going to be used to deploy the cluster. Generally speaking, this refers only to the bootstrap and the control plane nodes. It then hands off to the control plane, and the control plane uses the cloud provider and machine config and all of that other fun stuff inside of OpenShift to deploy the workers itself. So what that means is that I can do things like not only create and provision nodes dynamically inside of there, but depending on which infrastructure I'm deploying to, like a hyperscaler, I can create load balancers, I can create lots of other resources inside of there. UPI, on the other hand, is user provisioned infrastructure, or administrator provisioned infrastructure. Basically, if we're talking vSphere UPI, somebody, some automation, could be Ansible, could be Terraform, could be bash scripting, could be whatever you want to use, creates the virtual machines, whether they're using static IP DHCP and the traditional UPI method, or they're using static IPs and the pseudo bare metal method. So what's the difference between UPI and what we call bare metal, which I think is not the appropriate name? So bare metal often refers to, or what we use to talk about, a non-integrated deployment. So if I'm deploying to physical hardware, if I'm deploying to, let's say, Hyper-V, right, there is no integration between OpenShift and that underlying platform. So therefore, we incorrectly call it a bare metal deployment because it's not always physical servers. Sometimes it could be any unsupported or untested platform happening underneath there. The key being, there is no integration. So with vSphere UPI, the integration comes in the form of like the storage provisioner, right? Whether I'm using the bare metal or the DHCP, or the static IPs via bare metal or DHCP with the OVA, either way, the UPI installer is going to deploy the vSphere dynamic storage provisioner. Note it's the entry one, not the CSI, the cloud native storage one. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now, so we can continue along here.
No, please. Soapboxes are important.
All right, so I'm just going to walk through these sections and kind of review each one and do the steps as they come up, and we'll see where this takes us and in how much time. So internet and telemetry access, if you weren't aware, OpenShift 4 by default does report some very basic telemetry up into cloud.redhat.com. This is for your benefit as well as for ours. We aggregate all of that information and use it to do proactive and preemptive type of support and fixes. So you can opt out of it. There is somewhere in the documentation a way to opt out.
If you're worried about it, go ahead and opt out. But the world would appreciate it if you did not.
Yeah, and it is very basic information. There's not anything.
It's so anonymized that even if I tried to hunt you down, I probably couldn't.
I don't want to.
Yeah, no one wants to anyway. Yeah.
So my particular deployment, I am using 6.7 U2. Just note in the docs that 6.5 is possible. So you can use whichever one of those works best for you. So we do need a set of virtual machines. So you can see a temporary bootstrap, 3 control plane, and at least 2 compute. This is all pretty standard. So now we're getting into the interesting stuff. So network connectivity, yes, we need to be able to pull some files down. Minimum resource requirements. So our bootstrap, 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM, control plane 4 and 16, compute 2 and 8, and all with 120 gigabytes of storage. These are the minimums. There is in a different part of the documentation, there's some guidelines on how to size the control plane based on the number of pods, the number of nodes that you expect in your cluster. So there's a link. There's getting ready to be some blog posts, I think today, tomorrow, sometime this week, that link out to all of that information in kind of a task-based way. So keep an eye on openshift.com/blog. Same for the compute. This is very bare minimum. These should really be sized according to whatever your workload happens to be. All right, so now we actually get into doing something. So the first thing that we want to do in creating user provision infrastructure is configure DHCP or set static IP addresses on each node. So since we are using static IPs, I am essentially going to use a set of DNS entries that already exist. And I apologize in advance. I cannot talk and type at the same time. So this is my named my bind DNS deployment. You can see I have a number of different zones inside of here. So different clusters is what these are configured for, as well as up here is my reverse zone. So we'll start with the one that we're going to use here, which is OVW. Oh, OWV. Helps if I type it correctly, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, typing is important.
Standard zone declaration inside of here. So you can see I have API and API int. I'll cover these in just a minute. We have bootstrap. We have master, which also has the etcd pointed at the same IP address for all 3 masters. And then we have our worker declarations. And finally, our SRV records for etcd. Again, we'll cover all of these in a little bit more detail in just a second. And then last but not least is my apps wildcard subdomain. And if we look at the reverse, interesting thing or important thing to point out when I look at the reverse, you'll notice that the etcd so the etcd-0123 or 012 rather, do not have reverse records. It's just the master that has a reverse record. And if we want to test out some of these, did I say OWV?
Yes.
Yep, we can see that one works. Forwards. And we can see it works reverse. We can test out our etcd record. We can see that also points to the master, as we would expect. We can test out our SRV records. I do have a note over here that I'm copying off of. There we go. And it comes back with all 3 of our records, conveniently. So the last thing that we need that was highlighted up here is our API and API int along with our wildcard. So we can kind of do the same thing, which is going to show up as .39 for all 3 of these, because that is where my load balancer is at.
Love me some load balancing.
So, and you can see I just did a dig at test. So this is the wildcard. I can put literally anything there and it should always resolve to this domain or this IP address rather. So with DNS assigned now, we can go back and check over here. So load balancer. So we'll look at our load balancer, which I'm running HA proxy on this particular VM.
Out of curiosity, which version?
I don't know off the top of my head.
No worries.
So I don't want named. What am I doing? I want
I'm sorry. I
HA
threw you
proxy.
completely off with that question. Wow. HA proxy.
All right, HA proxy. Pretty standards. I don't remember. I think I probably copied this from Christian and or Christian's helper nodes deployments Ansible playbook. Deployed everything.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Christian.
So one thing to note here, so I did turn on the stats. So this is so that quite conveniently I can look at the connection status if I had it running correctly. What's going on here?
I believe there's a question in chat. Is F5 load balancing supported? I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, like just about everything load balancing wise is supported as long as like you're able to configure it.
Yep. Yeah, I know for sure F5.
F5 for sure. Yeah.
Citrix, because I've seen and or worked with both of those. Others, we don't necessarily know what load balancer is external in service and serving those ports, so I don't think it really matters so long as it load balances. I know like Citrix ADC, their stuff, they have an operator. I think F5 does as well, if I remember correctly.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, so for them, they have additional integration with OpenShift, etc. But anyways, so all we can see here in our HA proxy config is the various endpoints that we have defined. So I do have the stats. I'm not sure why that's coming up. I'll probably have to check and make sure HA proxy is running. So we have our front ends for the API server 6443 with the back ends. You'll note this is the bootstrap as well as all three masters. We have MCO, the machine config server, which is also pointed at all three of the masters as well as bootstrap. And then last but not least, we have the two ingress for HTTP and HTTPS, which are both only pointed at worker nodes. So HA proxy, like most proxy or most load balancers, will check to make sure that, and there's an option somewhere in here, it'll check to make sure that all of these are working. Yeah. So if I only bring up two workers, for example, it won't send any traffic to the third one. It'll just ignore it. So not a big deal. And just to make sure that that's working correctly. There we go. All right, so that's our stats page. You can see I don't have anything turned on right now, so it's all red. And this is HA proxy 1518.
Well, okay, thank you.
Just to answer your earlier question.
That.
All right, back over to the documentation. Ports are good. I don't have a firewall, so they're all on the same network. DNS is good. We just looked at that. Ensure network connectivity. It does have access to the internet, so we should be fine. So here's the port config. If you have firewalls between these nodes, keep that in mind. Again, I don't. It's all a flat network that everybody sits on. So when we were talking about, or when I was showing the HA proxy config a moment ago, remember there was the internal, so API int and API for this ports. There was only the machine config operator, which is if you have two separate load balancers, this is only internally needed, so on and so forth. I'll glance over that a little bit. And then DNS requirements. So this is going back to the named, the bind config that I showed. We have API and API int. We have the wildcard for apps. And then we have our etcd forward lookups, but no reverse. And then we have our etcd SRV records. So all of those are requirements. And again, if you look at, I will continue to plug Christian's helper node because it is a phenomenal, even if you don't use it, it's a phenomenal reference for how everything should look.
Yeah, definitely.
So I do have an SSH key. If you don't have one, you can follow the thing here. I use ECDSA these days, the epileptic curve.
Yeah, so in OpenSSH, the latest version, 8.3 that just came out, they are deprecating RSA.
Oh.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. Or they're announcing they're deprecating RSA. So yeah. So that'll be a lot of fun.
I just use ECDSA for the type and a byte size of 256, which I seem to remember being told somewhere that's equivalent to at least RSA with a 2488-bit length.
Right.
Okay, so SSH key is good. I went ahead and pulled the installation program. So that's quite simply off of cloud.redhat.com. If we go to cluster manager and create cluster for OpenShift container platform, I'm going to run this on vSphere. And down here is where I can grab the installer. So a little trick, we recently changed this where whatever operating system you select, it automatically links. You can't see me pointing, but down in the bottom of my browser window, you see the link. If you want to go and look at all of the other versions that are out there, you can just copy that link and remove the specific download, and you can see all of the things that are in there, including going up a directory, and you can see all of the other versions that are available. You can do the same thing if you go to download pre-release builds. And after you scroll through all of us warning you that this is unsupported and all of that funness, you can do the same thing. And if I paste that in here, you'll notice the difference. The URL is different. We have OCP dev preview / pre-release. So this is where you can see, for example, all of the releases for the nightlies. And if we come all the way down here, and I'm showing you this now because I do have this already downloaded for IPI, you can grab the 4.5 nightlies to be able to see that. So production release comes from here, right? Just grab the latest one. Nightly releases come from here. They're both linked off of cloud.redhat.com. Just depends on which one of those buttons you click. So I do have, and let's check these. Nope, not from that one, from my desktop. So if we look here, I've got 4.4.4. And same thing with OpenShift install, 4.4.4. I see the chat moving out of the corner of my eye, but I'm assuming that
I got it. I got it.
I'm deliberately ignoring it unless you ask me something. So okay, so we've got OC, we've got OpenShift install, both at 4.4.4, and these are the GA versions, not the nightlies. And now we need to create our install config-YAML. So this will apply, again, whether or not you're using DHCP or static IP addresses. So we definitely need to have that. And you can see I already created this. Can I increase this? Not that way. Gedit isn't going to let me zoom in. Fine. I'll do it here, where it's easier for everybody else to read. So pretty straightforward. If you look in the documentation, they provide an example of this. So literally all I've done is take that. So one important thing is after this step is when we switch over to the bare metal install method. So the platform here, we still want to be vSphere, and we want to provide our vCenter credentials. That's important compared to the bare metal methods, which you see up in the documentation before, which doesn't have a platform. This platform section is just empty. So we do want that regardless of which one of these we choose for IP address assignment. You can see I've got 3 replicas, or excuse me, 3 masters. I have 0 workers defined in here. This is according to the documentation. So you'll note here, 0 workers, 3 replicas. I've specified my cluster name is OWV with a base domain of lab.lan. I did define networks here. This is an optional stanza. I don't remember where I sourced this from, but that one had the networking defined, so I'm just leaving it in there. As we come down below, we can see our platform section, which is filled out with our vCenter information. So we can look at vCenter again. We see our cluster is Shadowman. We have our username and passwords. Our default data store is the IVM, which is this one right here, our iSCSI data store. And that's pretty much it. Beyond that, we've got FIPS. We're not doing FIPS. We've got the poll secret, and we've got the SSH key, the public SSH key that will be used inside of there. So we're not doing cluster-wide proxy, so I'm not going to worry about that. And now we need to create the manifest and ignition config files. So I lied a bit. We do need to follow this step to mark the masters as unschedulable before we switch over to the bare metal method. So we just need to follow this, and I'm literally going to copy and paste so as not to worry about typing. So OpenShift install create manifest. What we will end up with inside of here is...
Question from Facebook. Why do you need the vSphere user?
So that is the credentials that it's going to use with the dynamic provisioner. And any other integration that it has with the underlying platform. So with UPI, it's basically the storage provisioner. With IPI, it's also used for the machine config to do, or machine config API, machine API to provision additional nodes, etc. I'm just making sure I have a backup copy of my install config because it does eat it when we run this command. So OpenShift install create manifests. And if we look in our directory here, we have two folders, manifests and OpenShift. If I remember correctly, we need to modify the manifests cluster scheduler O2 config. And we need to set master schedulable equal to false. Do here is set that to the correctly spelled false. Write that out. So if you dig around inside of these directories, you can see that there's a whole bunch of YAML files inside of here. So effectively, these are the files that become a part of the Bootstrap's ignition config file. So it takes all of these, it base64 encodes it, it spits everything out. And then that's what's used to actually instantiate, right, control all of the things that are happening on our Bootstrap. So when we want to modify things that are happening very early in the installation process, this is where we have to do that at. And now what we will do is create the, I'll continue to follow directions over here, we'll create our ignition configs. Setting a good example for my kids, following directions.
Yes, doing what you're told by the directions.
So at this point, it is, as I said, ingesting all of those manifests, and what we will end up with is a set of ignition files. We can see our Bootstrap file, we do a -h, is almost 300 kilobytes as compared to the master and the worker, which are only 1.8 kilobytes, right? So all of those ignition files, all those YAML files that were up here are a part of that ignition, and that's why. So now we can switch over to the bare metal method. So normally if we were doing DHCP, we can use the OVA. We would import the OVA. We would then either turn it into a template and clone it out for however many nodes we need, or we could just repeatedly import it if we like to chew up network bandwidth. I'm going to switch over to bare metal here. And we want to go down to the same section that we were just on, which is creating the RH CoreOS machines. Yes. So the traditional way, and I'm going to deviate a little bit, and as far as I know, this is still supported. So the traditional way is to boot the machine to the ISO and then edit the kernel boot line. So when it comes up to that thing, you hit Tab or E, depending on if it ACPI, IPMI, whatever.
UEFI?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
So anyways, you edit that command line and then you add a bunch of parameters here. So I think these two, I think those two are there by default, but then you have to add these three, which point at, you can see where the kernel, the image URL is, where the ignition for that node is, and then the IP line for that. And you'll note down here that the IP line, if you're not using DHCP, is this monstrosity. I cannot highlight to save my life today.
Yeah.
So you can see what we're doing here. We have the IP address we want it to use. We have the gateway IP address. We have the net mask. We have the host name. We have the network adapter. I don't remember what this one represents. Christian probably does. And then we have
wait, which one? The none? I think that just means
none.
like it's not like a special type.
I don't remember.
I could be wrong.
And then afterwards, we have what our DNS server is. And this is just a Draycut IP configuration line. So if you look up the docs for Draycut, it'll follow that. It'll describe what each one of these is, like why there's a double colon here. I don't remember what's getting skipped there, but something's getting skipped. So typing in all of this stuff, a URL times 2 plus this massive IP line in a word is not fun. It's 2 words, I know. I wasn't going to use the other word. So the way that I've been doing this lately is by creating an ISO that is customized to offer me a boot menu for each one of my nodes that has all of this information already filled out. And that gives me the ability to type all of that in and edit it in something like Vim or gedit or whatever I want to do.
Nice.
So the process for this is pretty straightforward, and it's been documented a number of places in various GitHub repos and all that other stuff. Ultimately, it just follows the same process you would with any Linux ISO that you want to customize, right?
Awesome.
So the first thing that I need is to download the ISO. I think I already have it here. I do.
I see the installer, yeah.
Yep. So here's our ISO. So if you need to get the ISO, find our cloud.redhat.com. Let's go back to we'll get the regular one for this. So all I'm doing, oops, I need the bare metal.
Yes.
Bare metal. I want to get RH Core OS. And we can see here that I have installer.iso. Right? So if we're doing DHCP, we'd pull the OVA, but since we're doing static, we want the ISO. So all I've done is download that. You can see it's not very big, 85 megabytes.
Mm-hmm.
And from here, I'm going to mount it.
So Christian comments, none means that I don't want to use DHCP in that Draycut command line, and linked the man page and everything. Wow. Special. Thank you, Christian. No, seriously though, Christian, thank you for being here. I could not field these questions this fast. So thank you very much. You get a gold star for the day, Christian. Somehow I will give you a gold star. Can I give you a gold star in chat somehow? I can block you. That's it. I can add as a friend. We'll do that.
You can block him. That would be the opposite of
that would be the wrong. Oh no, I don't want to report him either. No, cancel.
So all I've done here on the command line, I'm as root, because you got to be root to mount things. I am loopback mounting my ISO that I downloaded to a very simply named ISO directory. And give our password here. And oops. And now we have in our ISO directory, we can see the contents of that image. So if you were eagle-eyed, you also saw that I created this RH Core OS 443-modified directory. This is where I'm going to actually do my modifications to the ISO. So rsync. So all I'm going to do is copy all of these files out. So I'm just using rsync-av. So A is archive, I think, and V is verbose. And now if we go into our modified directory, we can see we have all of our files. And just like with any ISO, with any CD-ROM, right, we go into ISO Linux, and we should see something, if you've ever done this before or worked with Pixie, right, we have our isolinux.cfg.
Yep.
Which I'm going to edit. So pretty straightforward. If you really want to read through all of this stuff, it's just setting up the way that it looks when it boots, all the background images and colors and all that other stuff. The important part comes down here. We have this generic install rel CoreOS thing. And when you hit tab or when you hit edit, right? So you can see here, press tab. So when you edit that, you're expected to go in and basically append all of that information that we need to our line.
Can you increase this? Right, you're in gedit, or you can't do that.
I don't think I can.
Yeah, no, sorry. Sadly, he can't increase the font size.
Here, I will edit it outside of here.
There you go. Thank you.
Hopefully that's a little better. So we have our label for our CoreOS installation here. And same as you would expect, just if you've ever seen Pixie, right? We append the kernel and then we have the kernel specification and then we append all of the different parameters that we need. So under normal circumstances, what we would be doing is this would be at the console for our virtual machine. We would be coming over here to this, and we would be typing in all of this information into one line. So rather than hating ourselves and being masochists, we're going to do all of that beforehand. So CoreOS inst equals yes, which should already be here. Right, we want CoreOS install device equals dev SDA. So we will add that. So you notice I'm just appending this into what I've got going on here already. So the image URL, so this I haven't gotten to yet. Oops, hit the wrong button. This I haven't gotten to yet, so we will do that just shortly. So this URL is where it pulls down the other data in our, where'd it go here? The other images that we need. So we grabbed the ISO, but we also need this initramfs, and we also need this kernel image. So those are going to be hosted conveniently on my helper node. Thank you again, Christian.
Yay, helper node. We need like a helper node celebration like thing to happen in the stream, like every time we say it. Kaboom, helper node.
So that can't you do that with the little animation?
I totally can. Yeah. It would just need some AI to analyze the voice stream of Zoom somehow. I can put that in as a button somewhere though. That would be cool. Now I have so much thinking and artistic work to do.
I am grabbing our initramfs. I'm grabbing our, there's another one that we need. Oh, the metal. That's what we need. And this is in the instructions. I think I might have skipped that part up here.
The downloading of the thingies? Yeah.
Downloading the installer is up here somewhere.
Yeah. I think it's like a couple paragraphs and like there's links.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Anyways. It's in the docs. We promise.
So image URL represents the bare metal image URL, which is this one, the metal.x86.raw.gz, I think. Let me reference my notes over here. Yes, that seems right. Yeah, metal.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can see I've already downloaded this before. So it downloaded a second copy.
All the disk. Burn it all.
All the disks. So I don't need the init ramfs. That's actually one used by Pixie. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And since I already have this one, you can see it's just a duplicate. I'm also going to remove that. So what we end up with is this metal x86-64 raw image. And that, the URL of that, is what we want to provide for this value. So I happen to know that my particular, where's my thing here? My HTTP server is on port 8080. Just as soon as I get the right keys. And we are in the install directory. This is our Huckleberry. All right, so image URL equals the metal image URL. Image URL equals the metal image URL. Ignition URL equals whatever node type we're going to be installing. So step one is we will copy over our ignition files to the HTTP server as well. We'll do that next. And we're going to go here. Add this guy.
You have an extra I in the config. I'm looking. I'm not.
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, you see it? Okay.
Yep. I think that was it.
Well, Waleed, can you rephrase your question? He's downloading 4.4. He's just using the latest version of 4.4. Whether it's 4.4 or 4.3, there's not that big of a difference. Or wait, which are you using? 4.3 or 4.4? Or 4.4.3 versus 4.4.4?
Correct. So to be clear, the OpenShift version and the CoreOS image version don't necessarily need to match so long as they're at the same set. So 4.4 or 4.3, or it doesn't so much matter if they're 4.4.4 or 4.4.3. It will actually pull down and it will apply those updates during the install process. So any updates that are there automatically get applied.
Ta-da. Thank you.
So this is going to be our bootstrap. Install line. So you can see all I did here, ignition URL. So same HTTP server, just in a different subdirectory, bootstrap.ignition. I haven't put that there yet. That will be the next step. And then the last thing that we need is to give it its IP address. So I am not going to type this whole thing out again because I've already done it once, and I am not a glutton for punishment. So we're going to copy and paste from over here and paste that guy in. And of course, I put the extra IP equals in there. So as I said before, IP equals, this is the IP address that our Bootstrap node will use. This is the gateway IP address. This is our subnet mask. This is the host name that it will use that is incorrect. WV. This is the network adapter that it's going to use. So ENS 192, which I think is correct. So we'll find out. And then this is our DNS server. So that's one line for the Bootstrap.
Oof.
So now what we're going to do is, how many lines is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
Yeah.
Y4Y. And now we're going to paste this guy in here and repeat that a few more times. Oh. All right, we'll start with that. So we've got Bootstrap. Now we're going to do master 0. Oops. It's nice and easy to find all of the instances. So this master 0, we now need to change to master. Oops. This guy out here, we change to master 0. We repeat for master 1. Oh, what's the keyboard shortcut to jump by words? I can never remember it.
It's DW is delete word. I think it's just Control and an arrow key, or Alt and arrow key. I forget.
Yeah, I can just use the N button. So escape out of edit and then use N. So master 1, which we've got set correctly.
W.
So you'll note that so the ignition, remember, is based on your node type. So master out here is where we assign the host name. And I am forgetting to change the IP address on each one of these. I just realized. It should be 61. This guy, quit jumping around on me. Should be 60. So now Bootstrap is 59. Master 0 is, where is it? Master 0 is 60. Master 1 is 61. Come down here to master 2. It's going to be 62. Your host name is master 2. Zero. Swear I know how to use this. Use VI. So this time, so worker 0 uses a worker ignition file. Its IP address is 65, which we can verify. So 65. And if we come out here, we change our host name to worker 0. Worker 1. Which is going to be 66. And update our host name. Okay, so I'm only going to do 2 workers with this because it should be all we need to get a functioning cluster up and running.
Should be.
I'll bump up the RAM a little bit is all. So the bare minimum is, I think, 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. But with only 2 workers, I think I usually do, it's either 4 and 12 or 2 and 12. 4 CPUs, 12 gigs of RAM.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
All right, so now we have, or what we should end up with, I forgot to change these. What we should have is a menu that will pop up when we, sorry, I can't talk and type. I don't know why I'm even trying.
That's why I'm here.
So what we will have is a menu that pops up. If you've ever seen any Pixie menu, right, where it has the options, any of the Linux installs, like if you do RHEL, if you do CentOS, etc., where you can select the boot option, that's what we're going to end up with for our virtual machines.
Sweet.
So I've updated this particular file. We will write it.
There's a lot of Vim knowledge getting shared in chat right now.
W for word skip in Vim. Okay, I see that.
Oh, did you have duplicate labels in there?
No, I did remove those, I think.
Okay, cool. I know you yanked them.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I did update the labels.
Cool.
That was the last thing that I caught. We have the menu label here as worker 0, worker 1. We have our URL is good for the metal image. Our ignition URL is set correctly for the node type, master worker worker. Our IP address is set for each one of these. Yes, there is a gap of 63 and 64. That's normal or expected. Our host name is set correctly. Master worker worker. And everything else should be the same, I think. All right, so now we get to do the fun part, which is create the new ISO. So this is a command that I stole from somebody. I don't remember who. My apologies to whichever one of our essays or tigers or consultants that created it. But yeah, there's our big hairy make ISO FS command.
Yay!
So what we're doing is we are going to create a new ISO, basically named RH CoreOS 443 modified. It is going to start in the current directory. So you see that I'm in my modified directory. I just went up a directory. And then the rest of this is basically, how to format the files, ignore these things.
Right.
Here's the output. It's going to output into my home directory with this name. And aside from that, we should be good, assuming I have make ISO FS installed on this box.
Oh, permission denied.
Oh, that's an interesting one. We'll try doing this. Yeah.
There you go. All right.
I'm not going to troubleshoot that in the interest of time.
But maybe permissions issue on a file for all we know. Who cares?
Yeah.
Let's go.
So here is our newly created ISO file. And if we were to mount this, we can see that it has all of our newly edited, changed information inside of here. So one thing to note is that, and we'll see this in just a moment, this is specific to the BIOS boot process. If you want to use UEFI, there is a different file that you have to edit, and I don't remember which one of these it is because I never do it. But there is a different one. I think it's Visa menu.
Yes, I think you're right.
I don't know, to be honest, because I never do that one.
So while Andrew's doing this real quick, I just wanted to point it out. We have a follower goal. I would like to have this Twitch channel have 1,000 followers by the end of June. We're a sixth of the way there with just over 600 followers. Thank you to everyone that followed us just on the stream now. So please share the stream with your friends, your family, your dogs, your cats, anybody with a Twitch account, and have them follow us here on Twitch. And if you're on YouTube and Facebook, that's great. Follow us on Twitch too.
Okay, so while you're doing that, I did the long and arduous process of uploading our ISO. Straightforward. Just add the ISO to the whatever data store you want to store ISOs in. So now we begin the fun that is creating VMs. So new virtual machine. We're going to create a new one. We're going to name this one Bootstrap. There's only one place for it to go. Oops, I forgot one step. So over here, installing on vSphere, there is a step So in the vSphere client, create a folder to store your VMs. So we do want to take care of that. Come over here and we do new folder, template folder, OWV, I think is what this one's called. Now we can create our VMs. You could also add your VMs to a resource pool if you want to do that.
And why would you want to do that?
If you want to do things like control the total CPU and RAM that's available to it, to the cluster, 6 of one, half a dozen the other.
Yeah. You could do that in the cluster. You could do that outside the cluster.
It's also a permissions delegation point if you do that inside of your clusters.
Yeah.
So I'm just answering the standard VM questions here. Where do I want to store it? What's my compatibility? So note that you need at least hardware version 13. However, version 13 really only, technically there is no RHEL 8 guest support, but we use it with the OVA. Version 14, which is the 6.7 and later, is the first hardware version to add RHEL 8 as a supported guest OS version when we look over here. So I'm going to go with VM version 14. I will customize this hardware according to what we saw earlier. So Bootstrap is 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM, and 120 gigabyte disk. I will attach this to a data store ISO file, modified ISO file that we created. And the other thing that we want to do in here is select BIOS. Remember what I said about how the file that I modified is specific to the BIOS boot process. So if EFI boot is important to you, just make sure you modify the other folder to add in all of those options, or the other file rather, to add in all those options. There is also, and I am forgetting where it is at the moment.
What are you looking for?
The disk UUID option. So one of the things that we want to set is disk.enable UUID equals true.
Okay.
And I can never remember where this is at.
I assume it would be an advanced option, but who knows?
It's been a while since I actually set that, if I'm being honest. So we'll complete that VM real quick. Yeah. I think I can go in here.
Advanced. Yeah.
There we go. And I don't think it's in here, is it? Nope. And the value is true. The others are capital. So we'll copy the others that are down here. All right. So we're good with that guy. So now we have our first VM.
Yay.
So to make sure that this is going to boot correctly, basically we're going to end up with it giving us the menu like we expect and all of that other stuff. Thank you to whoever pointed out the advanced over there. CC Home Lab.
Appreciate that.
So we'll go ahead and power this guy on and open our console. I don't have the MRC really. And we see we have, it pixie booted. That's why. So the reason why it did that is, and let's power off. It pixie booted is what it did. That's why there was those 3 options. The reason is I attached the ISO, but I did not connect the ISO, which is an important step.
Minor detail.
So we'll turn it back on, launch the web console.
I probably can't tell you how many times I've actually done that, like not check the box kind of deal. Yeah.
So you see here, we have all of our options available to us. So all of those menu options that we just laboriously created with a handful of commands, you can see I can hit tab and you see this gigantic line that I would normally have to type in.
Thanks.
So now all I need to do is basically hit enter and let it boot, and it'll go through and do its thing. So we'll watch this one for just a second just to make sure that nothing goes horribly, awfully wrong. And it did. Yeah, so that's because I didn't add. Remember before when I said the next step that we're going to do is to put the ignition files over where they belong? Yeah, I didn't do that. So from here.
Waleed says another successful boot story. Proud.
I know, right? All right, so now we need to SCP our ignition files. To our ignition directory.
Oh.
As soon as I learn how to type. Oh, because it's trying to do it as me.
Oh, that'll do it.
Username is important. And then if we switch over to there, you can see I'm in that directory.
And there should be files now. Yay. Oh, Christian says, remember to do all the fun SE Linux stuff.
Yeah, I've worked around that by doing a...
damn.
I just turned off SE Linux because...
Dan Walsh's spirit is going to haunt you for all eternity. He's going to hunt you down.
Terrible administrator and employee. And
you did this live?
I know.
What, you let people know this like publicly? Oh,
so
it's a lab. Dan Walsh is going to get
lab.
You.
Anyway, so thank you, Christian, for the reminder. But yeah, I just disabled it. So we should be there. I am going to change mods to 644 on all of those, just so I don't have to remember and embarrass myself by not remembering what the Apache user is, or the HTTPD user, whatever it is. And we can test that just by browsing to it.
Stop disabling selinux.com.
I know.
Christian's not going to let that go.
And we can see that it offers me to download my ignition file. So there we go. So now this guy can be restarted.
Yeah.
I think we can restart it.
Would it restart on its own and pick it up, or do we need to like...
If you wait long enough.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't need to close it out, did I?
Well, you know.
All right. So there it pulled in its ignition URL. So you see, you can't see my mouse because it's in the VN or whatever this console session is, but it pulled in the ignition. It's now downloading the bare metal image and applying it to the disk. And here in a second, it'll reboot itself and start doing bootstrappy things. Now we get to repeat this process. Remember what I said about using some sort of automation before?
Yes.
In case you're wondering, no, I didn't stage that. We'll cheat in just a second. At least I think it'll work.
So I'm actually shopping for T-shirts at the store that Christian sent over in the chat. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing now. Thanks, Christian. I was actually looking at just that shirt, by the way. All right, questions here. Let's see. Can you add services such as AutoFS to RCOS? Our users' data is mostly in NFS and usually so many volumes, so they prefer to have AutoFS. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think we support modifying the disk layout or partitions associated with CoreOS.
No,
Is it technically possible? Yes.
Probably, yeah, but
I know it is because you can hack, quote unquote hack, so that etcd on the masters uses a RAM disk for persistent storage. You see the glare and the air quotes persistent storage in a RAM disk.
yeah, sounds
so
fun.
Yeah, it'll be super fast and it'll get you past any hardware issues that you have until you reboot anything, or
Game over.
then you're having a bad day. So this is a master node, 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM, 120 gigabyte hard disk. My network is VLAN 101 connected to our ISO file, and I went over here. I did not change the boot, but I did set the disk.uuid, so I will change our boot now. And we should be good. So now we've got master 0. This guy up. And I think I can clone this. And we'll see if it works the way I want it to work. Works the way I want it to work. I mean, it's not going to actually copy the disk. It's going to do an offloaded clone via VAI. We shouldn't need to customize anything inside of here, so we should be good.
So interesting. Okay, so in chat from YouTube, Ahmed asks states, for those who are interested, because this messed my days up for so long, this process will not fully work if you do not have a proper DHCP broadcast, even if you assign the static IPs using Terraform.
I don't know that using, the assigned static IPs via Terraform, what that's doing is it's creating an ignition file to create an ifconfig script or file inside of CoreOS. And then the expectation being that it will pick that up and use it for that static IP address. I don't think that works anymore.
Right.
I think that stopped working. Maybe with 4.4, it might have stopped in the later 4.3 days. You can still work around it if you try hard enough, but regardless, it's not supported. The only supported way of doing static IPs is to use the bare metal method, which would be adding all of that data, the IP equals line on the end of the kernel line. How you get that in there, I think we are less concerned about. So I showed doing it with an ISO. If you temporarily use DHCP, right, to pixie boot it, you could do that way. 6 of one, half a dozen the other. But attaching an ignition file via a VApp property to assign a static IP address, regardless of whether or not it works, is not supported. So this did work the way I expected, by the way. You see down here, my clones are happening quickly.
Clones. Hey, yay.
So we're going to do that 2 more times. Clone to virtual machine.
Oleg Popov asks, hi, what about Bitfusion? I don't even know what Bitfusion is. What is Bitfusion?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
I gotta look that up. What is Bitfusion? GPU acceleration. Yeah, we support GPU acceleration, but I'm not sure if it's directly through Bitfusion. I'm not sure how that works in the VMware environment.
Honestly, I am not either.
Oh, never mind. Sorry. Well, go ahead.
VMware just changed some things, but I think that might have been vSphere 7 related, and how they virtualize the GPUs to do migration and stuff like that. So I'm just double checking the config on one of these guys, just to make sure that we have everything we expect. Data store ISO connected. Boot options set to BIOS. And under our advanced, if we check our configuration, we have disk.enable UUID set to true. So everything went according to plan. So we'll turn this guy on.
Would this also work on vSphere 7, by the way? Funny you should ask.
So yes, it works, as in Andrew, has tested it and validated
Andrew
it.
has done it. There's a blog post, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
However, it has not been, thank you. However, it has not been tested, validated, etc., by engineering and the folks who need to certify it so that it is fully supported. So that support is not coming until, I think, OpenShift 4.6, if I recall correctly. It's on the roadmap.
Right. Like it will be supported, and my restream chat is not working. Well, it's terrible. Great. I mean, start that over. Jeez, please. So yeah, it'll be done soon-ish. What, 2 quarters at most? 4.6? Yeah.
So if you're watching along at home still, all I'm doing is turning on each one of my VMs and telling it which of the boot lines we want it to use. So you can see this is, so up here in the corner, we're on master 1, and then I'm telling it to install master 1. We come over here and we do master 2. Rinse and repeat. And this probably will slow down a little bit as my network gets overwhelmed.
Yeah. Meanwhile, please follow us on Twitch, and I will try and get your blog post thingy shared real quick. Not supported. Officially
worker 0
possible.
And last but not least, worker 1. Because they're all equally important. They're all special children.
They are all special. At least to Kubernetes.
All right. So at this point, we should have our bootstrap process going. I know I stopped following the documentation a minute ago, but the next step after we basically install or created our VMs and attach the ISO to install is to power them on. And then we would type in that big long line, which we avoided. So now we can do where am I at? No, not on that guy. Install wait for bootstrap. So this came back almost immediately, which means that at least the bootstrap came up, which started the basic Kubernetes API that this responds to. And now we're waiting for the rest of the bootstrapping process to complete.
Last minute question, or this, I'm sorry, can't talk. Minimum memory specs on the ESX host, you said you got 64 gigs there, right?
Yeah, my lab has 64 gigs. It'll just barely fit inside of there. Like the host will be complaining about how much memory it's using. So for a demo, if I'm not running any actual workload, it works fine. But in reality, you'll want to have something like 128 gigabytes across the cluster, not in a single host, across the cluster available.
Right.
So I'm going to SSH to as core at. So I'm going to SSH as the core user to my bootstrap machine, which is, this is our cluster name, this is our domain name. So remember when I created the install config.yaml, it's using my public key. So it should use my public key to authenticate as core here, which works successfully. And it very helpfully prints this command for us to use to check on the status. So I'm kind of late to the game here because the bootstrap's been running for a few minutes, but you would be able to see a bunch of different stuff get stood up, and then it's going through and it's repeating this. We see we're on iteration 1600 and change of waiting for these manifests to get created. So what's happening in the background here, bootstrap instantiated, it stood up machine config operator, it stood up a few other things. The master nodes came online. They used their bootstrap to then look to the the instance of the machine config operator that's running. So if I were to come back over here and look at my HA proxy, you can see my bootstrap is responding on the machine config server endpoint. So the expectation is they went and got their master configuration from there, which is a generated configuration. And now they're going through and they're doing things like applying any updates. They're rebooting as the case may be, which is probably what we're waiting on if I had to guess. Hopefully that's what we're waiting on. Yeah. So they're rebooting because they applied whatever version of CoreOS it asked for. They've applied any other things inside of here. Basically, we're waiting for them to come back up and start a bunch of other services. So if you SSH and you see these messages, especially this 99 OpenShift machine config worker ssh.yaml, that's basically the bootstrap just cycling, waiting for the control plane nodes to come online so it can apply some configuration to them before it moves on to the next step. So it's perfectly normal. I'll ignore any comments, personal sentiments about error fatigue and only getting error messages that are important and should take action. But at least it gives us a status, general status of where things are at the moment. And we can see that this guy is back up. So it should take it another minute or two. Again, everything here is going across a gigabit network to a single disk. It is an NVMe drive, but it is a single disk. So it takes it a second sometimes. Let's see. Let's look at our data store latency. Yeah, it's not too bad. So it's 10-ish milliseconds of data store latency.
So I have to do something rather producer embarrassing and grab a drink. I will be right back. You do this for a second for me, will you?
I will happily sit here and do something. So more or less, and again, for anybody, I see somebody just asked, what are we doing? So this is deploying OpenShift 4.4 UPI using static IP addresses. So we're about an hour and 10 minutes into the process at this point. More or less from a hard work. All the hard work is done. We're just waiting for the cluster to instantiate itself. The way that this works, or the way that the install process works with basically all of the install methods, whether it's IPI or UPI or bare metal, is the cluster kind of, once you kick off the bootstrap, basically everything happens inside of the cluster. It kind of self-instantiates. So the bootstrap is the first part to get, and we saw those manifest files on all the services it's standing up and all of that. Come on, you can get there.
There's a request for showing the PXE iPXE configs while the cluster bootstrapping happens.
Yeah, I can show that. So the bootstrap comes up. It has the basic set of services. The masters come up, they get their config from the bootstrap, which instantiates all the master services. So etcd and all of that other stuff. Once that's done, then the masters are the authoritative control plane, and the machine config operator then configures the workers, and then all the traditional operators. So if you look at the, do like an OC get cluster operator, all of those operators get deployed and start deploying their services to the cluster resources. So once you kick off the installation and point everything at their ignition files, it's hands off from there. The cluster does its own thing.
All right. So 2 questions, one from Facebook, one from Twitch. Do the Twitch one first because it's quick. If we would have used DHCP instead of fixed IP, we would have followed the vSphere documentation instead of switching to bare metal, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
Yes. So essentially what we would do is we would import the OVA. We would clone that OVA out into our nodes. We would then take the MAC addresses that are associated with those and do static DHCP IP assignments. And then from there, it's basically same thing. We let it install. So for my lab, this is the PXE setup that I have. You can see all we're doing here is basically pointing it at the same set of resources. We're just not attaching that ISO to get it to this point. It PXE boots and reads in the init RAM-FS, which is what's on the ISO. The kernel in the init RAM-FS is what's on the ISO. After that, you can see basically everything from here on is the exact same stuff that we added. And you could including you could assign a static IP address here if you only wanted to use DHCP to Pixie the particular node. So if you have a node that has maybe multiple network interfaces, one that is Pixie enabled, and then one that is for like management, et cetera, and then one is the public where everything goes, you could absolutely Pixie boot off of that network and then use the IP equals line to configure it to use that other interface as its primary interface if you wanted to. Absolutely a valid config.
Okay, so did you answer? Was that the CIDR question that you answered? No. All right. You don't see Facebook questions, do you? Okay, so I'm assuming CIDR and VXLAN was set to default values. I guess that's in VMware.
So the CIDR, I mean, that's the subnet size, right?
Right.
So
I mean, it's whatever you want.
In my network, it's a /24. I'm not using VXLAN. This is standard layer 2 networking.
Yeah.
So we come over here to our network tab and look at VLAN 101. This is I didn't use a DV switch, a distributed virtual switch, because I have one host and I can keep up with the config on one host. I'm okay with that. So no VXLAN, no NSX, no overlay, just straight layer 2. Add over here. There we go. See how it moved past all of those other errors that were happening before? So this is back on our Bootstrap nodes. Our Bootstrap node is going through and it's now instantiating various services. These actually happen in stanzas of 4 when this updates every 10 or so seconds. You can see ready, pending, running not ready, and does not exist. Basically, we're waiting for all 4 of those to be ready. I see somebody asked if we disabled SC Linux.
Yeah.
I'm going to plead the fifth. I'm going to plead the 5th there.
I mean, he might have. He might have.
Yes, I did, because I'm lazy. If you use Christian's helper node script, helper node does set all of the SE Linux contexts correctly and make sure that everything works as you would expect. So again, I cannot strongly endorse that automation or using that automation as an example for how to set up your environment for all of this various magic.
There's just a lot of questions coming in, or just a lot of chatter. Sorry, not questions.
That's okay.
Lots of chat. I like it. It's great. It's just hard to follow sometimes.
So as you can see here, again, the 4, these happens in stanzas of 4. We've got 3 readies and 1 running not ready. And these will bounce around a little bit as it goes through and does whatever it's doing. But eventually they'll all come up. One thing we can do at this point is, so let's get out of this guy. And I want to so I can export the kube config that's generated as a part of the install process. So when you do the OpenShift install create ignition config, it generates or it creates this auth directory, and the auth directory has the kube admin password that it's going to use, as well as our kube config file that we can use with OC or kubectl. And if I do an OC get node, hopefully we will get back. Yep, see our masters are coming up over here on the various services. It will eventually come back with our nodes, which are coming up. So because this is UPI, we do want to check for things like certificate signing requests for the additional nodes as it adds and stands up services. So I am keeping an eye on the time.
Oh, don't you worry. I'm keeping an eye on the time too, buddy.
We might, this will probably take another 10 minutes to finish provisioning. So I don't know if we want to go all the way through or just trust that it's going to work and then kick off the IPI process. Hilariously, The IPI process, kicking it off, takes about 30 seconds. I spent an hour getting everything ready for UPI. But IPI is super duper easy comparatively. You only need 2 DNS entries and that's it. So I do want to save at least 10 minutes just to kind of go over a couple of things with the IPI process and show what that looks like. Whether or not we actually get to the point of deploying or letting the cluster fully deploy is another matter. So let's see where we're at here. So our bootstrap process is done. It is safe to remove the resources. So we can come back to our vSphere environments and we can turn this guy off. And I'm going to do it in a aggressive, you will power off now manner.
Do it now. Get out.
And at this point, we are more or less, so we can do wait for install complete. At this point, we're just waiting for all the various cluster services to come up. So you can see we're working towards 444 at 81%. Much like the points on whose line it is in anyways, I'm pretty sure those percentages don't mean anything and are made up. I especially appreciate the one that says 100% complete, but still waiting on several services.
Waiting, yeah. Can't beat that, man.
And if we look, okay, we're still waiting on. So CO is short for cluster operator. We can see all of our various cluster operator services are in various states of coming up. So eventually we'll get to the point where we have some CSRs that are in the pending process, and we'll want to approve those so that the worker nodes will join the cluster so that any services that are only deployed to workers or cannot be deployed to masters can get deployed. Yes, etcd probably just did a re-elected a master due to the terrible leader changed due to the latency that it's probably seeing. Yeah, it's probably angry right now. That's okay.
How angry is it? Oh, it's so angry.
It's a lab. It'll get over it. You can see, oh, this one's not too bad. So we're still in the 60-ish% memory consumed on my one lonely node. So yeah, it's what appears to be a network issue, throughput issue. It's gigabit network.
Gigabits are gigabitting too slowly.
Aha! There's our 2 pending CSRs.
There we go.
So OC get CSR, OC ADM approve, certificate approve. And remember that there is 2 that will come in for each one of the nodes. So here in a second, we'll see another pair of CSRs that need approving. Here's the first one. And there is the second. Now that those are approved, we see our workers are joining. So at this point, it's just a waiting game. More or less, we're waiting for all of these things to deploy. You see it's at 98. There's a good chance that now that the workers just joined, it's going to redeploy CoreOS with any updates since whenever that image was created. So it'll probably reset itself back down to some lower percentage number and go from there.
What type of privileges does a vSphere user need?
So I am running as administrator because I can. That being said, the precise privileges that it needs are based off of and we might have this in a KCS somewhere, but I don't know where. So I want the VMware. So if we look in this guy, the vSphere storage for Kubernetes, this is the N-tree storage provisioner that's deployed as a part of the UPI process. And it's VMware created it, but it's N-tree with Kubernetes, which is why Red Hat supports it, as opposed to the CSI one, which is out of tree, which we do not support.
So Christian answered the question. I just need to reread it in chat, basically. So basically, it needs an admin. So I'm just going to reread the answers just to make sure this relayed through. So Satish, question 1, basically needs admin. Question 2, yes. Question 3, the password is stored in a secret on the platform. Question 4, you wouldn't be able to provision storage automatically. Question 5, change the secret. There we go. Thank you, Christian.
So the vSphere user does not need to be an administrator.
In your face, Christian.
This is the set of permissions that they need right now, just for dynamic storage provisioning. With IPI, it will be different because they will need the ability to provision virtual machines along with some other things. But more or less, this is the set of resources. And I know for sure for any Red Hatters that are listening, there is a Mojo page that one of the field guys created that lists out exactly what the tree looks like. So we can dig that up and share it. And maybe get that published externally as well. Like I said, there might be a KCS. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. But this is the set of permissions that it needs minimally. Otherwise, I think Christian answered all of those. There is a KCS. I don't think it's on this one of my desktops. It's on another one of my desktops that I have it bookmarked. That shows how to change the vSphere credentials, but you can go to access.redhat.com and search for that.
Mm-hmm.
So come back over here just to check on this guy.
A lot of people answering the questions themselves, and that's that's the folks
great.
Interacting. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So we're going to assume that this is going to work. We're literally just playing a waiting game, waiting for all of these operators to deploy and come up. And it's largely based on how fast or not, as the case may be, my server is. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to kill all of these VMs without shame. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to show, where is power? What am I missing here?
Did you? Isn't the trend to use CSI instead of in-tree storage as the future is for CSI? Yes, but we didn't opt for CSI here because it's your home lab, correct?
So 2 reasons. So yes, the in-tree provisioners are being booted from Kubernetes. I want to say in the Kubernetes 1.20, 21, 22 timeframe is what the storage SIG has announced. So CSI will become the method. So the reason why this is using the in-tree method is because that is what is deployed by the UPI process as well as IPI. And that is what is supported by Red Hat. You can, after the fact, go in and deploy the CSI provisioner. Just keep in mind that the CSI provisioner is not supported by Red Hat. It is supported by VMware. So if you deploy it, your OpenShift cluster is still supported, all of the different components and aspects of that. But anything related to that VMware CSI provisioner is supported by VMware, not Red Hat.
So yeah, a couple of reasons then. So like CSI is obviously coming along, and the standardization of it, I think, will become a little more stable as we go here.
So you know what I did? Did you see what I did there?
I didn't. I am actually looking at T-shirts, to be honest with you, and
you remember how I said I was going to indiscriminately power off all of these VMs?
You didn't do that, did you?
Oh no, I did.
Did you do the whole box?
I turned off vCenter.
Good job. Good job. Very thorough.
Oh, and it didn't just it apparently I turned off the actual host.
Holy smokes.
That's hilarious. So we'll give that a second to boot up. And yeah, while it's doing that, we'll take a look at this.
Hey, what's going on here?
So inside of this directory, I have conveniently pre-pulled the latest nightly for OpenShift 4.5. If we do OC version, come on. If I do OC version, because it's trying to contact the cluster to get its version. So it was timing out. Anyways, we see we're using 4.5 nightly. And with this, and as soon as that node comes back, because I need vCenter.
You can't blame your kids. This is your fault.
I know, it was 100% my fault.
It's not like somebody's streaming something and like the stream's down. This is doing it live. I love it. It's great. Oh, it's back. Hopefully.
Well, this is the node is back. Now I got to start up vCenter, which is easy enough to do. Thankfully, it just takes it a second to power on. So while vCenter is booting, so in deploying from IPI is super easy. If you were to look at the documentation, essentially all it's going to tell you that you need is 2 DNS entries. So let's go back to my DNS server here. And we can look at our bind config. So for OVV, you can see I have 2 entries here, one for API, which is at the 219 IP address, and one for star.apps at 220. So this would be our API and our ingress that it's going to ask for in just a second. And if we do a quick dig against these, plus dig, plus short, 219, and we can do the same thing with the apps. And it comes back as 220. That's basically the only prerequisite that we need at this point. So it does use DHCP. So we will see at DHCP. We don't need to do any static reservations. We don't need to do any of that other stuff. DHCP is, as always, a requirement for IPI. So just be aware of that if you are trying to do it. Looks like our vCenter may be back. Nope, not all the way yet. It'll get there. Probably, hopefully, maybe.
How many more hamsters do we need to send in?
Yeah. I need to do like
Wait for
James. I need to do like James and use Packet hardware because they have much more substantial hardware than I do.
Yeah, no, I wish I could afford the lab environment that I want. But yeah, let's see. Okay, so is this setup can be done without a vCenter, just with one ESXi node?
No, because it does need to talk to the vCenter API.
Right.
However, you can do it with evaluation licenses. You just have to reload everything every 6 months.
Oh, fun. Let's see. Christian said you can use the bare metal UPI method on ESXi.
Yes, you can. All right, that's going to fail. That's not going to go anywhere. All right, so I am going to do. I am going to create my cluster and hope for the best. So you can see all I'm doing is a standard create cluster. I will add the log level. And it's going to ask me the standard set of questions that we see with all IPI installs. So this is the SSH key I want to use. I am going to deploy to vSphere for this one. My vCenter is vcenter.work.lan. My user administrator. Oh, and apparently it's not up yet.
Shocking.
Or, oh no. All right, I'm not going to go through that.
Oh. Yeah.
That is because, so you do have to, and it walks you through it in the documentation, you do have to bring in, if you're using a self-signed certificate, bring in the certificate and trust it locally. I'm not going to jump through that hoop right now. I'm just going to make this work since we're down to 4 minutes.
Well, so here's the deal. You can go long, and I'll just be over here doing something else, and you can just tell me when to cut the stream. I mean, it's that easy.
So
done it before.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see. So all I've done here is I switched over to my helper node, which is my normal working node that I've been testing this with. So it's already trusts the vCenter certificate, so I don't have to jump through that hoop. Otherwise, it has the exact same versions of everything. So this time, we are going to tell it which one of these. So it is a vSphere platform. Really? Really? Okay, fine. That one, it was, if you were quick, it was saying that it could not find the vCenter. For some reason, DNS just failed to find it, even though I can dig it. I don't know what's up with that. But we'll try again. I swear this works. Don't judge.
I believe it. I've seen it work. My own eyes. I've seen you do it.
There we go. So now that everything, after that DNS flakiness, Christian, I'll expect a root cause analysis email from you.
Yep.
So now that everything works, you see I gave it to the vCenter endpoints, my username and passwords. It then basically queries and says, where do you want to deploy your resources to? So I'm going to use my iSCSI data store on VLAN 101. I'm going to give it our API address, which was 219. My ingress address, so that's the apps wildcard address, which is 220. My base domain, which is lab. My cluster name is OVV. My pull secret is conveniently over here in one of these. And that's all it needed. There was a carriage return at the end of that. So at this point, it's doing an API install. And if we, yep, and if we catch it fast enough, we'll see where it wants to download the thing. And yes. Chrome 39. How long ago was Chrome 39?
Like at least 6 months ago.
So right, what we see here,
I've got to step back and just let me know.
Okay.
Christian will text me when it's over. I might be back shortly. Who knows? We'll see.
Okay, we'll see.
Nice.
So what we see here, So we've got this OVV-FQD9M-RHCoreS, which is being deployed from OVF template. So what the IPI installer has done in the background is it pulled that template down, that OVA, and it is now importing it into my vCenter here. So this will take a second for it to upload the 800 or so megabytes as a VM. And once that's done, it will then follow through the process. So if you've seen IPI with Rev, if you've seen IPI with OpenStack, any of the other on-premises platforms, basically follows the same pattern. Create a template VM, then clone out that VM for all of the others that are happening in the background. So we're just waiting on that import process to happen at this point. And this usually takes about a minute and a half inside of my lab. While we're waiting on that, we'll see if I can safely destroy VMs and not take down my entire lab this time. So, Christian, I just had a thought, which is I'm going to send you the Zoom info and see if you can join this particular meeting. Just so I don't feel so alone all by myself talking to an echo chamber. All right, so we see that it finished importing our OVA. I'm going to close that now. Close that now. It is now cloning out that OVA into all of our different virtual machines. So we see Bootstrap and then the 2 or 3 masters rather have all been created. We switch back over here, we can see it's going through, and now basically we're at the same point where after we had started the VMs, so we created the ignition files, we hosted them, we started the VMs, we selected which one it was, and it went out, right? It installed CoreOS, and then it went out and pulled that ignition file down. Basically, all of that just got done in this one step. So we are at the same point where the Bootstrap is now instantiating, waiting for all of its various things to come online. We did not need to provide a load balancer config because it is going to be using keep alive D in order to move that IP address around to whatever host it needs to be hosted from. So that's why we see this route to host. Basically, we're waiting for one of the hosts, Bootstrap first, to come up. It will take ownership of this IP address, and it will begin responding to API queries on that particular IP. So at this point, we are very much simply disk bound when it comes to what's happening inside of our environment.
I'm on. Look at
hey,
that.
I was so alone. I'm afraid of the dark.
There you go. Now you don't have to. You'd be so alone. Am I appearing on the stream though? I guess my voice could be.
Yeah, you're on the stream.
Oh yeah, I see it. I see myself.
Yeah. You gonna wave to yourself?
Yes. Hello, chat people. People in chat. I decided to jump in since I was fielding all the questions here. So
yeah, and with Chris otherwise occupied. So if you weren't paying attention, Christian, and just to recap, IPI is IPI, right? So we are at this point, Bootstrap and the masters have been deployed. So we're waiting for the control plane to come up, at which point the IPI installer will move on. And I brought up my vCenter here to show the disk throughput that's happening against my data store. Mm-hmm. And this is see, look, it's not my fault. This is entirely because I only have 1 gigabit network for storage. Right.
So it's so I haven't played around with the vSphere IPI. Can you go through some of the is there any prerequisites that need to be in place? From what I understand, it's all kind of self-contained, and if you want to access it from the outside, then there will be some prerequisites.
So the only prerequisites I'm aware of are the 2 IP addresses.
Okay.
I want to go to. So if we go to the installer GitHub repo, so remember that this is pre-release,
Yep.
which means that there is no documentation at docs.openshift.com. All the documentation is going to be in here. So if I go to
ADoc, right, format.
Yep. So if I go to the installer GitHub repo and I go to docs, user, vSphere, and then inside of here,
there we go.
We have our requirements. So follow along with the steps, blah, 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 virtual IP and DNS. So again, from a prerequisite standpoint, you need 2 DNS records and IPs, API and the star.apps.
And those point to, what does it say here? Must be created to which DNS server is appropriate. The record should have the following values. Okay, so the VIP. So in this case, what, a load balancer, or does it create a VIP for you?
It will create a VIP, a virtual IP address inside of the cluster. So it's using Keep Alive D to host that IP address on the control plane nodes.
Nice. Okay.
So if you saw or if you've experienced Rev API works the same way. This technology came from the MetalCube project. So they're the ones who kind of pioneered the whole how this is working behind the scenes.
Okay. So then you just have to, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be a pre-existing IP. It's just an IP you're allocating.
Correct.
And then the installer will plumb it for you.
Correct. 2 IPs that you're allocating, and then the DNS entries associated with them. Privileges, you can see here we have all of the different permissions that you will need for an IPI installation. And then last but not least, we have the actual, the big set of things here. So remember, if you were paying attention, I tried to do this from my desktop here, and it spit back an error about the SSL certificate being untrusted. This is what you need to do, which is just pull down that certificate into the right place and then run the
extract.
Update the CA trust. After that, you run the create. So they did an install config here if you want to make it repeatable. I chose not to when I showed this one. Still doing its thing.
So there's actually a question here. There is a Rockhound, my friend from Germany, says on the 4.5 nightlies, can you create auto scale? Right? Can you do auto scaling with a nightlies currently?
As far as I know, which is nobody has told me I can't, but I haven't tested it. Yes, node auto scaling and all the other things you would expect to work with the with a machine API integration should work with vSphere. And we'll see that once this is done installing. You'll see that they exist as nodes inside of there. There'll be a machine set. It usually deploys 3 nodes, and by usually I mean every single time it deploys 3 worker nodes. My physical host cannot accommodate another one, so I will scale that down in order to show that it is possible to adjust those on the fly. But auto scaling should work as you would expect.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and also someone asked about the community involving, and thank you, W. Shari. Yes, you would have to go to the OKD Commons. We actually do that once a week, I believe, here on the Twitch stream. I think it's Wednesdays. You go to OpenShift.tv, and then you'll see a calendar with all the events that we're running on Twitch, and one of them is the OKD Commons.
Yep.
When will OKD 4 be GA? So I actually know the main engineer that's behind it, and he told me 4.6, and then he did this across his fingers. So they're targeting 4.6 for OKD to be GA.
So one thing, if you've ever done an API install before, it's much less interesting from a demo perspective, because it's mostly just waiting for it to do what it needs to do.
It's like watching paint dry, essentially, right?
Yeah.
You just run the command and go get a cup of coffee.
Yeah. So in the background, all of those same things that we showed with UPI are still happening, right? The bootstrap came up, the bootstrap configured the masters have to go through and do their thing, and then the bootstrap will hand over to the masters, and then, right, that's when we'll progress past this step here. So when we saw all of those thousands of messages scrolling by about how it was waiting for 99 SSH something, that could be what's happening in the background. It could be waiting for that other thing of the pods waiting to come up. But basically all of that is happening behind the scenes. We just didn't have to do anything to get there except for run one command and wait for me to type the credentials correctly.
Yeah. So the main difference is, right, so whether you're doing UPI or IPI, the actual Bootstrap server is actually doing the install. So like it's you're not really, you know, the U and the I is what matters in the UPI IPI, right? So it's like the user provision infrastructure, meaning getting the infrastructure up is either being done automatically or being done you know, by the installer, meaning, or by the user, right? Whether you're doing it through Terraform or Ansible. So a lot of people think that UPI means not automated. No, that you can have a lot of automation built around the UPI installer. It just means that whether the installer is creating the infrastructure or whether the installer is not creating the infrastructure. So I think we should have came out with a maybe better descriptive terms for what for like the installers, right? Because there's like confusion. Sometimes I even confuse myself trying to explain it. Show the journal from the
somebody said to show the journal. So you can do that. All I'm going to do here is grab the IP address. So it's 101.179. You can see, maybe you can see it might be a little small. So it's 101.179. So remember, I used the root at this particular node. I used this SSH key.
And do you know what they're using for DNS in terms of naming these hosts when you're doing a vSphere IPI?
I do not.
I think they're using the internal, or they're using MDNS.
So I think it's still core DNS. They're just adding the MDNS module.
Gotcha.
So we can see it's past all of that scrolling for the SSH config, and now we're just waiting for these pods to come up. Which they're almost ready. There's only one that's not in that status. So one thing to note, troubleshooting the Bootstrap process can be interesting. So yeah, you can use this command that it prints out at the beginning. One other thing, especially with this IPI process where it's doing this keep alive D, you know, is my IP address going to work correctly? So switch over to root and then do a create control dash or create control PS. And you can see there's all of these pods running, or all of these containers rather, running at the system level. One of which, so you see core DNS, you see keep alive D. So you can look at the logs from these in order to determine what's happening early in the Bootstrap process. So if it never progresses past Bootstrap, see, it just moved past it. So if it ends up failing at this point, that's a great place to look for any particular errors that might be happening. So it moved past it. What we'll see here in just a second is it'll destroy the Bootstrap. So I exited out of it before my session got hung.
It's interesting that you said CRI CTL. I always say CRI CTL.
I'm from the South. We make up our own words, all right? Leave me be.
As long as you know what I'm talking about.
So I switch all the time between kube cuddle, kube CTL, kube control. Like I'm an equal opportunity offender of words.
I say them all so that way no one's happy.
Yeah. So you see it did destroy the Bootstrap. So at this point, more or less all we're doing from this OpenShift install command, and this is the equivalent of OpenShift install wait for install complete, is it's literally just reading what's happening from the output of OC get cluster version and testing to see when it happens to be done. So you'll note over here that the workers aren't deployed, right? So even though Bootstrap is gone, even though I just said that OpenShift install isn't doing anything, there's no workers. That's because it's actually going to use the machine API operator to deploy those workers internally. So that's why with IPI, that user doesn't have to be administrator, but whatever user you provide to it needs to have permissions to be able to deploy virtual machines to the resources you have chosen. So whatever cluster, whatever data store, etc.
So yeah, so I always run as admin, but ideally, you would have sort of like a service account, right, for your VMware, or some sort of robot account that just has the bare minimum in order to run this.
And just like with IPI, see it generated all of this information, including the auth directory. I can export my kube config, and I can, before it's done booting, or before it's done installing rather, I can do some OC commands to check on the status of my cluster.
Sweet. Uh-oh.
Oh no, and just as I say that, it broke.
Yeah, well, the API went away, right? For whatever reason.
Yeah, so this could be a couple of different things. Probably related to my storage being not quite sufficient. It could be etcd is re-electing a master. It could be keep alive is moving the IP, and it's back.
Yeah.
It could be a couple of things. Again, I wouldn't consider it worrisome at this point unless it keeps doing it after the install is completely done and everything's settled.
Yeah, during an OpenShift install, there's a lot of noise in the log. So it is sometimes, I'm like, is that an error I should worry about? Or is it an error I should not worry about? And you kind of need to figure out where you are in the installation process. Yeah, see, there we go. Leader changed.
Yeah, which again, in my for me in my lab is usually a result of storage. etcd has it's 10 milliseconds of latency at the 99th percentile and greater than 50 IOPS. And specifically, there's
a tool, right, by IBM. The IBM guys have.
Yeah, well, it's FIO, but the IBM guys. Okay. Yeah, so the IBM guys basically figured out the specific FIO command to use to test, in the way that etcd writes. So if you want, and here I will paste this into, if I can find it, the chat window.
10 millisecond threshold for 90th percentile operations. Okay, yeah.
All right, so there's I just pasted the link into the chat. So that's helpful to check and see if your storage is capable. I find that most often this is applicable, outside of an enterprise data center, like running an Andrew's home lab, or, if you don't have an enterprise storage system.
There's some Red Hatters that are running crazy labs. So we're all full of geeks, and some of the things some of these guys have is like they're gonna be selling compute pretty soon.
So we see our three workers have been created. If I come on, switch back over to here. You can see that this is doing, so my command stopped because the etcd, it stopped replying to the API, but sorry, wrong one. This is the one I was looking for. Yeah. I just confused myself. So the command could have stopped because the API stopped responding, but it didn't in this instance. But yeah, it's basically going through and deploying a cluster just like we would expect. OC get cluster operator shows that most of these are in progress. Let me zoom out just a little bit so we can see all of them. So as usual, things like authentication take a while.
Some of these are dependent on the router, right, being up, and the router runs on the workers. So there's like a hierarchy that needs to happen.
So we can see our workers haven't been added yet. I base it is by the CSRs. So many of these will progress once the workers actually join the cluster.
The approval should be automatic in an API, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so usually the CSRs come first and they'll wait for just a little bit. So if you're kind of in between, that's how you can tell they're knocking at the door to get in.
Yeah. They're asking, "Mother, may I?"
But if we were to watch these, we would see them. Usually they come up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the workers come up and then they'll sit there and churn. You'll see the screen flash and see a bunch of those SE Linux invalid mount errors. And then it'll reboot the node. And that's so all of those SE Linux invalid mount errors are pods getting started. They are harmless, I've been told repeatedly. I don't know which pods and why some pods cause that and some pods don't, but I've been reassured multiple times that they are harmless.
Yeah, I've been told the same. I haven't been told why I haven't been told why, but I've been told, don't worry about them.
Yeah. So as we were saying before, IPI is a lot of just waiting and assuming that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Yes, we could connect to the masters if you wanted to. You can SSH into those. You can also look at the cluster operators. We can see some of these have progressed as well. So in particular, if there's one that is progressing or one that you're curious about, so you can do like OC describe cluster operator, and we'll pick on machine API. And what this will do, as soon as it responds, again, storage.
You can get some NVMe,
See,
PCI storage.
it is NVMe, but it is it has VDO writing on top, and VDO adds a couple of milliseconds of latency. So when it's a perfect storm of already an additional layer across the network with 3 very latency sensitive things simultaneously hitting it, right? Three etcd nodes, it can cause issues. So if you wanted to see the status of a specific cluster operator, right? So machine API in this instance, just do a describe. We have this status, and we can see all the various transitions that it's going through. Events down here.
That's a good question here. So is there some sort of taint or label that tells which cluster operators to run on the master nodes?
Yes. So if you look at, so let's see, get node, let's see, describe node. So if we describe our nodes and we look up here in our taints, you see this master node schedule, and additionally there's a label that is associated with the role of master. So if we look at really, there's no pods in there? Because it's OpenShift machine API. So if we look at our pods inside of here, for example, so I'll go with this machine API controllers. So if we look at these pods up here on our tolerations, you'll notice that there's a toleration for master node schedule. And then there'll also be a node label selector up here somewhere to select for the masters. So I think that there is, I think you can force pods to run on masters. I don't know how that affects support's stance and support status if you were to force that to happen. Of course, you would have to be like cluster admin type of permissions, right? Enough to be able to override that or add a toleration for that specific taint, which is limited as well. And I think I'm just getting familiar with this critical add-ons toleration. I'm not sure how that affects it as well, but I think it does play a role.
Yeah, that's also another layer. I'm also need to read up on that because that's also another layer of scheduling workloads. There it is.
Yeah, so you can declare pods as critical, which means that they will not be evacuated if the node is drained.
Yeah.
So our workers have been added, which means that their CSRs automatically got signed and approved. So if you're used to doing that with UPI or any of the others, don't have to do that with IPI.
So it should just work.
That's the theory. As soon as it stops bouncing etcd around.
Yeah. So I mean, even with this, I mean, I've done enough VMware IPI installations, UPI installations where like this is like leaps and bounds from doing the UPI install, because UPI install could take some time, especially to get everything right on VMware. So, yeah,
I mean, we started at what 1:15, and it would have finished about 3 o'clock, so an hour and 45 minutes, and that was with me having pre-staged a few things, like we didn't go in and like DNS and the load balancer was already set up. So yeah, it can be compared to UPI, which is settle in for a good 2 to 3 hours to get a cluster up and running. IPI is much easier.
So just for my well, there we go. Just for my information, right? Is there a way after the install to? So what if you're like a person like me and I want to use F5? Is there a way for me to opt out using the VIP?
I don't know the answer to that for sure.
Or to like move it, I guess, move the VIP over.
So I know that you could add in, for example, the operator for F5, for Citrix, for whoever that may be, and integrate that way. As far as replacing the VIP that it's using for that, I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I off the cuff, I would say that kind of turns it into a UPI type of deployment.
Yeah.
But we would have to get, and it's a valid question for, probably for OpenStack and Rev IPI as well, as to how to do that. But I'm guessing it's technically possible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are technically possible but not supported.
Yeah, there's a one of our chief architects, right? The chief architect for the telco, he used to say everything's possible, but not everything's supported. And I think, and I always prefix anything I say about anything that we do. I'm like, well, it's possible, whether or not supported. That's a gray area. So, oh, Amy says, "What do you want to do in OpenStack?" She's getting into the mix here.
Oh, it's not OpenStack per se; it's OpenShift on OpenStack.
Yeah.
So back to watching paint dry.
Yeah. So there was another question. Since F5 Big IP would be like type 4 load balancer. Oh, so you mean like a layer 4 load balancer? Yeah, I think F5 does layer 4. Layer 5, I think.
Yeah, it works the same as HA
7,
proxy.
Yeah. Overt, you mean Rev, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, Overt's obviously not supported by Red Hat, but it should work just the same as with Rev.
Yeah, layer 7 gets a bit tricky with OpenShift because you have to start passing certs around, right? Because there's like certs that OpenShift creates for itself, and then that has to be imported into the into a load balancer, right? If you want to do something like re-encrypt.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the load balancer partners that have an operator, if they work differently, because it's an operator and it can do other things inside of the cluster. It may be different there, where you can create additional routes and then assign that route basically as an external. Create a load balancer entity on that Citrix ADC or F5 ADC, whatever that happens to be. I'm glad that we have our audience here to ask questions while we're waiting for this process to finish. You can see, so it's going through and it was at 86 and then it said it was downloading update. So this is to my point before of...
It's now it's back to 1%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Points don't matter.
The cluster will apply updates and do things as it needs to, right? That's what the operators are there for. So even though, like if I were to install with like an OpenShift install version that's 448. 448 isn't out yet. I think 446, 445, 446 I think is out
446,
today.
yeah.
Or yesterday.
On the fast channel, yeah.
But if I'm using like a CoreOS 440 or 441 image, basically when it deploys, it will figure out whether or not it needs to apply to make everything match, and then it will update it all, which is kind of what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I also I mentioned this in the chat, but I'll mention it again. Is that you'll always want to do like for like as much as you can with the installer and Red Hat CoreOS version. because a lot of the stuff is baked into the image, and a lot of updates are like bug fixes. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I ran into the issue where like it just wouldn't install. Like I was trying to OpenShift and it just wouldn't install. And I was talking to engineer saying, "Are you using the latest version of Red Hat Core OS? Because there was a bug." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So
Hey, look, it finished.
Hey, you got it.
So our cluster is now.
So here you're hitting the VIP.
Ready? Yep. Grab our kubeadmin password. And we have a cluster.
There it is. Look at
There'll still be a few things kind of bouncing around and
Yeah.
updating and all of that because it just finished and there's still operators.
I like the new status view. That's nice.
Yeah,
I like
and
it,
as
yeah.
there's other operators that, and I don't know which ones precisely. I've seen a couple that will add their status in up here as well, so you can get a high level view. Yeah, you can click on this and see what's going on. Right, and again, this is my lab. This is my lab not having enough resources to do what it needs to do, and not make it angry.
I'm telling you that Dell T7910 that I have, really nice.
So we see 3 masters. You can see it's using 16 gigs of RAM in each master, 8 gigs of RAM in the 3 workers that it provisions. Pretty standard stuff. We can look at machines because this is IPI. That means that so if it was UPI or bare metal, right, no integration installation method, we would only see nodes. Because it's IPI, we see machines provisioned as node. We see machine sets for our worker over here. If I wanted to, let's look at our host and let's see. Yeah, see our host is at like 90% memory utilization.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can deploy another nodes, but I can certainly scale one down.
You can scale down a machine set, right?
Yeah. I'll let it settle for another second before I make it angry again.
Yeah, well, while it's settling, my question would be in the on the cloud installations, machine sets are zoned to availability zones, right? So like there's a machine set for like US, West 1A or whatever, right?
Yeah.
How is this configured on VMware? Like how are they?
So the short answer is I don't know. I have not tested yet to determine whether or not we can create things. So like I can do, it's not what I wanted. So if we look at this guy, you see that there's a lot of information in here around, if I can get down here, right? Where is it? So here, the provider spec. So you can see cores per socket. We can see how much memory, the number of CPUs. Down here, we can see which data store, which vCenter server. So there's a bunch of different information in here. What I don't know, and I haven't tested, again, don't have the resources, but I'm hoping to find out, is can I create a new machine set and have it be in a different cluster in the same vCenter? Can I have it use a different data store? Maybe I want some that are sitting on, hybrid storage, flash fronting hard drives. Maybe I want it on all flash or NVMe or, whatever that happens to be. Maybe I want it to be connected to a different network. Maybe, there's a bunch of different things that, if I want to spread my workload out, maybe I want to have some that are GPU enabled. So I have a cluster that's GPU enabled. So definitely one of the things that I'm interested to find out is whether or not we can take these machine sets and customize them and then have them behave just like the machine sets inside of the other cloud providers. So AWS, Azure, Google.
That'd be cool to see how this evolves. This is really cool. Someone asked, no. So someone asked, we don't have infra nodes, correct? And if you scale down, you might affect the ingress, affecting the console.
So you only need 2 worker nodes to have a fully redundant and available cluster. That being said, I think with only 8 gigabytes of RAM and 2 CPUs, I don't think that there's enough resources for it. It basically will encounter resource issues.
No.
Of course.
Your server's misbehaving.
I know.
And then another question is, did it create the default storage class like a UPI?
Yes, it sure did. So if we look here, we can see that we have our storage class here. I can create a persistent volume key.
Yep. In. I want it thick, and lazy 0.
We can see that it was provisioned inside of, so we have a PVC associated with it. If I were to come over here to my data store, you can see that we have our kubevals folder that holds our PVC.
Oh, with the long UID
created.
Nice.
So, and if you are using vCenter or vSphere 6.7 U3 and later and use the CSI provisioner, there's a whole nother thing of where it'll surface up additional information about what pods are using that volume, all that other fancy stuff. The VMware guys can talk ad nauseum about it.
Someone on the Twitch chat. So I guess this is just logistical, just letting everyone know. So William asked, does chat from YouTube live show on Twitch? And the answer is yes, because I'm reading it right now. So if you're chatting on YouTube, we should be able to see it. We may not be able to reply directly to you, so you have to watch the stream. We can't at you, but we are able to see it.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't remember. I think it's just YouTube and Twitch that we're doing right now, if I remember
correctly. Facebook as well.
Is it okay? So I don't know about Facebook, but I know for sure Twitch and YouTube will cross post with each other. So if you chat something in YouTube, it goes to Twitch. If we respond on Twitch, it goes back to YouTube. As Christian highlighted, the at stuff just doesn't work. So you have to just watch. If we're on the other platform, I should say. So if you post on YouTube and we respond on Twitch, then the at doesn't work.
So here's a question, and I think this is a valid question. I think I know the answer to it, but could you update a 4.4 UPI setup to a 4.5/0.6 IPI VMware later on? So
technically, I think the answer is yes. Whether or not it's tested and supported, I don't think so. I believe for the hyperscalers, it is something that is possible, but for on-prem, I don't know. Again, I think it's something that's technically possible, but whether or not it's been tested and is therefore supported is another thing.
Yeah, so for VMware, for vSphere, I know it's a kind of like it's a little different, right? So generally speaking, if you're doing like an AWS UPI versus AWS IPI, there's no conversion you need to do. They're just installation methods, right? Same with Azure, same with GCP. VMware is the only kind of like differentiating thing because we're adding machine sets to IPI for the IPI installation. So heretofore you weren't able to do that. So as Andrew said, hopefully we should be able to convert those later on.
And while you were responding, I scaled down that worker machine set. So what we should see after a moment is the machine. You can see it's in the process of deleting. So more than likely, it's in the process of evicting all of the pods. So it's having a drain operation done upon it. We can see over here scheduling disabled.
Deleting. Yep.
So once that's done, it behaves exactly as you'd expect, and that this machine will get deleted over here. But until then, we'll just wait and see what happens here.
Someone says if you can post the doc or /blog or whatever for the vSphere account privileges. I know you showed it, but I don't know if you posted it on the chat.
Yeah, so there's two places. So one, if we're talking IPI, it'll be in the documentation for IPI. So let me copy that and paste it over here.
Oh yeah, there's a privileges dot markdown. I see it there.
So let me paste that. And then for the other one, I can never remember. I should really bookmark the URL for this thing because I look it up constantly.
It's in your DuckDuckGo history, I think, but it's
I know. I can never, and I
Kubernetes dynamic version or VMware or vSphere maybe. There you go. Storage
I'll find it. It's somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
There it is.
That was way too easy. I just had to actually read. I was expecting it to be purple.
Oh, because you've searched for it before. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
You were looking for the visual color versus actually reading the words. Oops.
All right. Let's see if that's done. Yep, we're down to 2 workers over here.
There we go.
So, turns out IPI is IPI, regardless of which IPI you're using.
Nice.
Did I really change off of that? I did. Reused my tab, the wrong tab. So we see 2 workers, down to 2 workers here. Our node is gone. Come back into my machine sets. We can do it all over again.
Yeah, by doing 3.
So what we'll see over here is we have a brand new worker node get created.
Oh, I see. It just basically uses that template, right? That
Correct.
RCause. Yeah.
So if I bring this guy up, you see clone virtual machine from this FQD9M RCause. So this template here, or this virtual machine. I assume that would work if you converted it to a template. I haven't tried that yet, as opposed to leaving it as a VM. But yeah, IPI is IPI, doing its magic.
IPI is magic. Fun stuff.
All right. So I know we went like 45 minutes over whatever the schedule was for today. But I think we had a lot of really, really good questions, got to showcase a lot of really cool stuff today. So thank you very, very much to our audience. Really appreciate everybody who has watched, who has asked questions. Hopefully it was a learning experience. I know I learned a couple of things, which is always makes it a good time for me. So please feel free to continue to ask questions. We'll hang on for a few minutes and answer those. But honestly, I don't have anything else to show right now.
Yeah.
So I'll keep everything up and running. We'll stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how long people are wanting to ask questions for.
Yeah, let me text Chris. Chris told me to text them when we're ending streaming, so we'll answer questions until Chris cuts us off. How about that? Let's see here. What do we got here?
So I see somebody downloaded the latest installer, but the VMware option is not showing. So you do need to download the nightly build. So let me find a tab here. So I'm at cloud.redhat.com/OpenShift. I'll start from the beginning. So cloud.redhat.com, cluster manager, and I think I saw somebody in chat said you needed to grab the latest nightly. I'll just show that process. So hit create cluster. I'm not doing dedicated, I'm doing OCP. I'm going to do this on vSphere. And down here, there's this non-obvious download pre-release builds button, or link rather. Select that one. And then from here, you have the OpenShift installer. So you can download the installer from here. So select your operating system and then hit the download link and it'll pull that down for you.
Yep.
So that's how to get the latest nightly build for whatever that happens to be. And you do need 4.5 for vSphere IPI. So you won't see that option otherwise.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have a couple of workers on vSphere and a couple of them in a cloud? So that falls into the category of things that are technically possible but not supported.
Yeah.
So cloud in particular is one that I don't believe is supported. On-prem, you can mix and match nodes as much as you want, so long as you use the non-integrated, aka bare metal installation method. So I could have my, masters running on physical servers. I could have, one worker in VMware, one in Red Hat virtualization, one is a KVM VM on a laptop, one in Hyper-V, right? The bare metal installation doesn't care. It's only when you're talking about a true UPI, so there's some integration, like with the vSphere dynamic provisioner or with IPI. So the reason for that is the machine API provider and all the other stuff doesn't understand if there's more than one infrastructure provider. And with something like VMware, right, if I deploy VMware UPI and I have that dynamic storage provisioner, it doesn't know either. So if I create a PVC and it provisions me, maybe I've got vSAN underneath the covers, it provisions me a vSAN volume, and then it schedules it onto a node that's running on bare metal or running in, Hyper-V or something like that, it's going to cause issues. So yeah, you could kind of work around that with some careful, taints, tolerations, labels, right, all of that, but that's just a big headache. We do see, and I have seen customers who are deploying virtual masters, right, virtual control plane, and virtual workers, as well as virtual or physical workers. And then again, bare metal install method, non-integrated, that works perfectly fine. They use labels to put some applications on virtual, some on physical, and it works great for them.
Yeah, and some of the storage limitations could be handled by either something like OCS or some other off storage provider, right? Like Trident also is probably like another good choice for storage if you're going to have like a virtual bare metal and things like that.
Yeah, so definitely you would want to use a external storage provider, something that can address all of those nodes. Trident's a great example. IBM Spectrum Connect, the Pure one. There's a bunch of them that are out there. I see somebody asking about, have we tried on VMware with vSAN? Yes, I have done it with vSAN. Works just fine. Works as you would expect. You can, I moved away from the page, but you can use the storage policy-based SPBM, storage policy-based management tags. So you can customize those storage classes. You can use them to set the vSAN properties. So if I want FTT equal to 1, 2, 3, whatever that happens to be, I can do all of that. Just use it expect with the entry provider.
I see Chris Short is on.
Yeah, y'all been going at this for a little bit.
Yeah, we went. We
just did a whole damn therapy session and then came back.
Oh, look at that! Yeah. Well, now you're ready for a few more hours of sitting after you got.
Oh God, yes. No. Okay. Yeah, you texted me you were about ready to wrap it up. So
yeah. We showed UPI and IPI. So.
Oh damn! Okay, cool, awesome,
yeah.
Great work, guys.
So
awesome.
Just working through some questions in the chat here. So when you click on Create Machine, will it ask for the role? So I'm thinking that question is related over here with the machine sets. So it'll always be some sort of worker. The masters don't have a machine set with vSphere UPI. They do with the cloud providers, but for whatever reason they don't with the on-prem. So you can create multiple of these, and if you look at the documentation, do I have the documentation anywhere? I do. So in the documentation, there is underneath the nodes subsection, and it's either machines or nodes. Machines. There is creating infrastructure machine sets. So essentially what you're doing in here is you're creating a machine set and you're telling it to apply additional labels or change the labels that are being applied. So you can absolutely do that inside of here, right? Create a new machine set or copy the existing one, set all of those labels. You could create, infrastructure nodes using that. And then it would scale on a per machine set type if you needed it to. Just keep in mind that even infrastructure nodes are still technically worker nodes, just worker nodes with additional labels and potentially taints. So.
Yes, someone asked, and I don't know because you are a NetApp refugee, so you would be best suited to answer this question. But someone says, does Trident, is it only NFS for NetApp, or does it do block as well?
So it does block. It does, for sure, it does NFS and iSCSI. And it'll do NFS, of course, with ONTAP. iSCSI, it'll work with iSCSI for ONTAP, SolidFire, and E-Series, unless they've changed something. And you can, so the Trident and Trident CSI provider falls into the same support category that like the VMware CSI provider does. You can absolutely deploy it, but it is not supported by Red Hat. It would be supported by the partner, so VMware, NetApp, whoever that may be. And it will not invalidate the rest of your cluster from a support perspective either.
I guess the final question here, and I think this is something for Chris. Someone's asking questions about OCS. I have no idea the answer, right? Specs are really high. So I think that shows that we need more OCS switch focus switch.
That's a good point. So, I need to get some OCS people.
We need to get those. We need to start, poking those guys so that way they come on.
You know what? I bet if there were more Twitch followers,
there we go.
They would be more drawn to come on.
Boom. Boom. Mic drop.
So if you're not following us on Twitch, lure the OCS people in and follow us on Twitch. And I'll reach out to the OCS people. Actually, I think I have a OCS meeting. Oh, that was last week. Sorry, my bad. I should have asked him then.
Yeah. So next time I talk to him, I'll try to.
Likewise.
To come on.
We'll dock your pay accordingly.
Yes.
No, actually, I think I had a stream, which is why the OCS meeting wasn't attended by me. So I couldn't ask them because I was here. My bad.
Yeah, because you were streaming. You could ask them to stream because you were streaming.
All right.
Okay, cool.
I don't see any other questions coming in.
Yep.
All right.
So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you sticking with us today, and enjoyed it immensely. So, Chris, I will hand the wheel over to you.
We out of here. Thank you, everybody.
All right,
Come back tomorrow for, let's see, what do we got going on tomorrow? OpenShift comments. Looks like James Gardner and Kevin Martelli from KPMG are going to come on to talk about AI platforms on OpenShift. And then later in the day, we will be talking about OpenStack basics.
Amy's on.
Amy's going to come on and teach us some OpenStack, y'all.
I mean,
to be honest with you, I have never done anything but consume OpenStack resources, so this is going to be interesting for me. OpenStack's still out there, still very much in use, and jump onto our stream calendar. If you're on our Twitch page, it is just scroll down. If not, I will drop the link in the massive chat across the board. Our stream calendar is publicly available. Yes, thank you. It is on OpenShift TV. It is also at this handy dandy shortened link, red.ht/streamcal.
I see. So real quick, Chris, so Circana asked, how do you add the OpenShift calendar to your calendar so that you can get updates?
In the bottom right-hand corner, there's a plus sign. Just click that plus sign, and it should take you to your calendar and add it in, let you pick the color and all that fun stuff.
Color? It's customization. Is it like DLC?
I don't know.
As you would expect, my son has been playing a lot of Fortnite lately because apparently there's an event happening this weekend. So all I hear about is Fortnite. Talk to him.
So it makes sense why you have gigabit internet.
Yeah, DLC. It's all about the
about the downloadable content.
What skins, what dances, what emotes.
The dances I get. I want fancy dances. Anyways, all right. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.